Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at NG Models July 2023 announcements. And first off, I must apologise because this video is a little bit late. They were announced last week, as you are probably aware. And there are 31 models in this set, but every month it appears NG is getting a little bit more repetitious, and this month consists of quite a lot of very similar models to earlier months, so it shouldn't take as long as it sometimes does to go through those 31 models because of this. And I have to say that last month's set I found quite disappointing, as I said repeatedly in the video that I recorded to discuss it, and this month is very similar. It is another disappointing set, and I can only hope that NG are getting through a lot of these duplicate models so that they will be producing a more diverse set in the future, and I guess we will have to wait and see whether that is the case. But before I get into discussing this month's models in more detail, please, as always, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check me out on my other channels at Yester Airlines on Instagram and Facebook, and obviously at the website yesterdaysairlines.com. I'm always producing a lot of new material, and for example, just the other day, I posted a detailed review of the new geminijets 767-400 mould and compared it to the ancient Dragonwings mould and saw which one of those was better. It wasn't the Gemini. So, there's always new material coming. I've just posted an Av History blog about Pacific Fly, so check that out too. And there's plenty of new content on its way, as always, at Yesterday's Airlines, so stay tuned. But first, let's get in and have a look at this month's NG announcements. So as I said, there are 31 models announced this month, but almost, in fact over a third of those models are effectively re-releases of earlier models. And so I'm not going to discuss those in all the detail. I'll just run through what they are and talk about the differences if there are any. For starters, there's an Air China 737-600 B5027. The only difference between this one and the previous release is this one doesn't have the Star Alliance logo. Next up, there's a China Southern 737-700 B5222. I think the only difference between this one and the previous releases is that it doesn't have the winglets. Next up, there's an Aero Mexico 737-700 XAGAM. I think the only difference here is that it doesn't have the eyebrow windows. Next up, there's an OK Air 737-900 B1739. Aside from the reg, I don't think there's any difference with this one. Then there's a 737 MAX for Bonza, VHUJ Kilo. Aircraft's named Sheila, but again, aside from the reg, don't think there's any actual difference. Then we got a couple of 787-8s, one for Scoot, 9V OFL, and one for Thai HSTQF. No difference aside from the reg as far as I'm aware. And similarly, an Air France A330 FGZCG. Its name's Saint Nazaire, but aside from the reg and the name, no difference to the previous release. The pattern here, hey? Next, there's an Air India TriStar V2 LEJ. This one's exactly the same as an earlier release as far as I'm aware, even down to the registration. Then we've got an EVA 7879, B17883. They're already releasing another reg, exactly the same, and also for a Starlux A350, B58502. Different reg, exactly the same model otherwise. And lastly here, a China Eastern Comac 919, B919A. It's already been made by NG, it's already been released. This one, however, looks like it's going to have a metal stand with it, so that's the difference. It celebrates the first revenue flight of the C919. All of these models have been effectively made before by NG. I don't really understand why they're remaking them. Certainly, some of them, like the Air India TriStar, completely unnecessary and incredibly annoying considering the lack of TriStars that we've been having. But lots of the others, I mean, do we need more Scoot 787s? They haven't even released the first version they've announced yet. So to release a second one just seems crazy. I don't understand it, and it's a bit pointless. And I'm going to be putting these models in a mixture of workhorse or gas guzzler, depending on you know, whether it's exactly the same aircraft that they've made before, and whether they have even released the original version they announced. Because, for example, with the Starlux and that Scoot, they've announced 2 versions now. Neither of them actually have made the market. Just seems crazy. Don't understand it. I know there's been a lot of criticism pointed at NG because of this behaviour, and I completely understand and support that. I don't like it either. These just seem like waste of time releases, and if anything, they're just giving ammunition to people who want to criticise NG models from other brands to say bad things. It just seems unnecessary. I don't see the point in this. But even with those 12 models, we've still got a good 19 others to talk about. So 19 models is still twice as many models as Gemini release a month. So it's easy to sit there and criticize NG for releasing the same models over and over again, and I agree with that criticism. But hey, they're still making twice as many other unique models as Gemini anyway. So is it really that bad, or are we just really spoiled? I can see both sides of that argument. Once we've got all those out of the way, let's at least get into the more unique releases. And we'll start up with a pair of Avianca A320s. We've got N398AV, wearing the Aviateca retro scheme, and we've got N776AV, wearing the Aerogal retro scheme. And I have to say that obviously they really seem to like these Avianca heritage retro colours, because they've already made the Tarka and the Laxa versions, and they both came out super nice. I should also say here that the Aerogal version of this is an A320neo, the other one is a CEO. I think these are going to be super nice. Nobody else has announced them. They seem familiar, and that's because along with a lot of the models in this set of announcements, they were the future announcements that NG announced a couple of months back. So that's why they seem familiar, but nobody else has announced them. And looking at the earlier pair of Aviancas, they came out super nice. So for me, these two are both Supersonic. They're both going to be super good releases. I know some people would much prefer the Avianca standard colours, but I like this set of heritage retro colours myself. Don't fit my criteria, but they both look great. Next up, we've got a trio of Airbus house colours A321neos. These are all variants of the XLR colours. Some of them have been made previously and some of them have not. So if we start with FWXLR, this one, which has an image of New York City on the port side, well, it's not New York City, it's the Statue of Liberty, and that's going all the way to the Colosseum in Rome, and it says flying extra long range. That one has been made already, but I think it's only been made by Phoenix, and their version's rubbish, and it's been made by jcwings, and their version's really hard to find. So this one will be very nice, and I think there's a market for it. The next one, FWWAB, this is the one wearing the QR code. This one has been announced by jcwings, but hasn't appeared yet. Hasn't been made by anybody else. And the last version, FWWBZ, this one's got Sydney to, I'm not entirely sure what those two buildings are. Is that Kuala Lumpur? I think it is. And this one has not been made by anybody at all. So they're all quite similar schemes, but not the same. And they're going to make a really nice trio. But there's only so many Airbus house colours that you can buy. I'm going to put these three into high flyer. I think they're going to be really good. I think that they're at least as good as the HYGL versions, and they're certainly better than the Phoenix or the jcwings ones. Some of them have not been announced by anybody, so they are quite new. And yeah, tempting to get the one that I don't have, or the two that I don't have these actually. High flyer, definitely high flyer. Now next up, another criticism which has been angled at NG recently is their love of special schemes over standard colours. And I get this too, because surely most people collect standard schemes rather than just the special schemes. And some special schemes are certainly more worthy than others. I think heritage schemes and schemes that are really trying to say something cultural or interesting, those schemes are really cool. Schemes that are more commercial are often a lot less interesting. And these two next models are both GOL 737-800s. Now, they actually have made quite a few GOL models, and they have made the standard colours, so you can't criticise them there. But I'm not entirely sure either of these models are really required. They're both kind of wearing variants of this Smiles Club, which I assume is some kind of onboard product that GOL has. The schemes aren't unattractive, but they're not particularly beautiful either. They're not doing a great deal for me. I guess if you're a GOL collector, you might be really after these, but for me, they're kind of the most boring kind of special schemes. And yeah, they're just not doing it for me. They'll be lovely models, I'm sure, but they're not doing it for me. And I'd much rather they'd have announced two more unique 737-800s if they were going to go down this and release 737-800s, as opposed to 747s or TriStars or T154s. Hey, NG, remember, you have those models too. Yeah, I'm going to workhorse these two. They're just not exciting me. And the next one is Chinese 737-800, and that's also not exciting me, and also in a special scheme. Now, I like Chinese Airlines, but this one is a Hainan Airlines 737-800. It is wearing a Pepsi scheme, and again, this is the kind of not very interesting marketing style scheme, not even for an interesting brand that I like. The aircraft is B1501. Yeah, it's just not doing it for me. The scheme looks okay, I guess, but it's Pepsi. It's I don't really want that in my collection, even though I collect Hainan Airlines, and yeah, I'm just going to workhorse that one too. It's just not exciting. Now, we've got several other 737s coming up, and several of these are wearing special schemes too, including the next one. But this is the sort of special scheme that I really do like. This is the new Alaska scheme, which celebrates the culture of the people of Alaska. I think it replaced the Salmon 30 Salmon scheme, and it really looks nice, this salmon people livery. It's a really complex, it's a really interesting scheme. It's got really cool story behind it in terms of the cultural aspect. And nobody else has announced this model. I can imagine Gemini will be making it, but their version won't be anywhere near as good as this one, because, as we know, their mould for a 737-800 is not very good. So this one is exactly the kind of model I think that people really will like. I think it's a model which is going to sell super well, and it's going to turn out lovely. This one's Supersonic all over. Really nice. Now, NG really do like Alaska Airlines, and they've released quite a lot, which must be really annoying Gemini. And the next model announced is also Alaskan, and it is a 737-900ER in 493AS. And this one is also wearing a special scheme. It's the More to Love colours. I can't say I like this scheme as much, and it's a super difficult one to get right in terms of the transition from red to purple to blue and so on through the fuselage there. It has been made by Gemini already, but again, their mould isn't anywhere near as good. It'll be interesting to see how NG do with this. And I know there's been some conversation about the accuracy of the artwork in terms of door placement and size. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what this turns out like, but I think it'll be nice. It'll certainly be better than the Gemini version you'd imagine, and it's not quite supersonic for me, but I'll high flyer this one quite comfortably. Now, I quite recently wrote about NG's release habits, and one of the things which is obvious is their interest in Qatar Airways. So it seems like you can't have a month of NG announcements without a Qatar Airways model being announced. But at least this one's a unique version. This one, a 737 MAX A7BSC. This aircraft is not being made by anybody else. And for that, I guess you can't be giving it too much criticism. The NG 737 MAX is excellent. So it's hard for me to complain. It's a new release. It's a new airline aircraft combination in the scale. And I'm going to put this one in high flyer too. I'm sure it will turn out really lovely. But I obviously, please, for the love of, stop releasing Qatar Airways NG and find some new airline to get excited by. but it will be fine. And again, this was a future announced release, as several of these have been, so they're not surprises. People already knew that Pepsi Hainan was coming, people already knew this Qatar was coming, and people already knew that I think the model I'm going to talk about next was also already coming, because that was equally announced a few months ago as a future release. And that is another MAX, and it is Southwest Airlines, another hobby horse airline for NG. They release a lot of Southwest, and they obviously sell well because Americans buy a lot of models. And this one, N8710 Mike, is in another delightful special scheme with some significant heritage aspect to it, or social aspect to it. And this one, I believe, is called Imua 1. The scheme is delightful. Really, really attractive, colourful, lovely patterns. It is a wonderful scheme. And again, just like the Alaskan Salmon People scheme, it's a great combination of modern art and graphic design and using the aircraft as a billboard. And I think it'll look spectacular in 400 scale, and I'm really pleased that it will be on the NG Max and not on that awful Aero Classics Max, for example. So this one's going to be amazing, and again, supersonic, clearly, without a shadow of a doubt. The next Max is another model that, again, they pre-announced as a future release. This one's a much, much simpler livery. It's just the Virgin Australia scheme, which is a really smart livery, but is mainly white, let's face it. The aircraft is registered VH8IA. It's called Monkey Maya, and yeah, it looks really classy, actually, to be fair. And I do prefer the Virgin Australia scheme to the old Virgin Blue block colour scheme, so can't really moan too much. It'll be nice. And again, I don't think anyone else has announced it. It's on the best Max mould. It's going to be great. Another supersonic, I think, for me, this one. Now that finishes off the 737s, and we've just got two more Boeings to discuss, and they are both 787-8s. They are not that interesting to me, but that's because they're not really airline related. The first one up is a Mexico Air Force, or the Mexico Air Force presidential jet, which has just been sold, TP01. This model has been made previously. It was made by Gemini a long time ago on their not particularly great C mold, actually not that long ago, 2017. Now obviously this aircraft is no longer in service, but NG do like Mexican Air Force models. This will be their third, because they've already made a 737 and a 757. I'm sure it'll be nice, but it isn't interesting me. I'm gonna put this one into workhorse. The aircraft has just been sold after quite a long sales process to Tajikistan, and is just become their presidential transport, I guess. It's been re-registered EY001, and that is the other announced model here by NG. It's got all the same, you know, not particularly exciting aspects as the Mexican version for me. I'm not really interested in government aircraft, especially when it's some state that's spending a lot of money on a plane they probably shouldn't be buying in the first place. So, yeah, I'm just going to workhorse this one too. It just doesn't interest me, but I'm sure it'll be a perfectly nice model. Nobody else has made the Tajikistan version yet, unsurprising. So it is unique, just not especially interesting. Okay, so we've been stonking through these models to the extent that there are only 4 left to discuss, and none of those are Airbus or Boeings. The first one is a Cubana Cargo TU204, and this one should have been at the start of the video. I apologise, because this again is another re-release. I didn't realise NG had already made the Cubana Cargo. They made CU C1700, and this is CU C1703. But it turns out that Panda have also made this scheme, and in fact this exact reg, which renders this one completely superfluous, even if it wasn't superfluous, because how many Cubana Cargo TU204s does anybody need and are realistically going to sell when there are so much better options for a TU204 release? This is a completely pointless model, and for that reason I'm going to gas guzzler it. It'll be wonderful looking, but waste of time, complete waste of time. And we end the video with 3 TriStars, and it's not often you can say that anymore. And these 3 TriStars are interesting, but a little bit niche. The first one is an NG release, the last NG release here, and that's Cathay Pacific. It was one that was pre-announced quite a while ago, VRHH Yankee. It's got the slightly updated version of the scheme without the Super TriStar titles on the tail, and without the black tip on the nose cone, and with the modified wire logo by the title. So it's different, quite a bit different to the previous NG Cafe TriStar, which was a wonderful model. It's a model which I will be getting. I'm really interested. It is obviously vaguely retro, or quite retro, which is nice. We're just not seeing enough, are we, on this mold, to be frank. But this one will be super good, and I will be giving this one a high flyer, because it's going to be wonderful, but it's not quite unique enough, I think, to get Supersonic, considering we've had a Cathay TriStar already. Not that I'm against multiple versions of Cathay TriStars, they all look quite different, and hell, if we can have 4 Jetstar A320s, why can't we have 4 Cathay TriStars? And that is all of the NG releases. But there are 2 Buchanan Models releases this month, and they are also both TriStars. And I've been a little bit critical of Buchanan because they've been releasing some really fringe hybrid schemes, which are a bit... They have no historical value, really, and no one really gives a monkeys about them, frankly. That American Transair TWA hybrid was a complete waste of time, in my opinion. But these 2 this month are quite interesting. The first one is... it's an Air Canada TriStar CFTNA, but it's wearing effectively the Eastern scheme, and it does seem somewhat that NG are taunting us with these bare metal Eastern TriStars that aren't in Eastern service, because this is the second, when they already released the Air America one a few months back. But it looks nice. It looks better than nice. I'm sure it'll be wonderful, and it has got a bit of historical value in terms of this one, in terms of the agreement that Eastern and Air Canada had in terms of leasing TriStars between themselves. So there's a little bit of an interesting story there too, and yeah, it's going to be nice. And I think that I almost certainly will end up getting it, even though the scheme would be so much better, as everyone has said, if it was just Eastern Airlines. So I'm going to high fly this one for much the same reason as the Cathay. It's going to be lovely, but it's not just quite there to get Supersonic, especially when we're not getting enough unique TriStars. But the last model, now this one is unique, but it's not real. It's real in the sense like the aircraft was painted this way, but never operated by the airline because it doesn't actually exist. So it's in the colours of a fake airline called Atlantic International, which was the carrier that was used in I think the film was from 1992, called Passenger 57. Quite an obscure movie nowadays, I would imagine. It starred Wesley Snipes, and I think it even had a very young Liz Hurley in it too. And it's not a great movie. It's one of those action hero on a plane films, but it did have this red top Atlantic International TriStar, and they actually put some effort into making the livery quite unique and giving the airline quite a cool brand. And I actually really like the look of it. It does look like the sort of scheme a TriStar would have worn in service. And obviously, this isn't the only potential TriStar that could come up from films, because Die Hard 2 also had a TriStar in it, didn't it? So you never know, maybe that one will be coming as well. I'm not sure quite what to think about these kind of fantasy but film models, but it is interesting, it is unusual, and actually when I first saw this I was like, what? But now I'm thinking, hey, this is going to look really nice, and I'm going to put this one into Supersonic. I'm actually, of all the models this month, this is the one which has probably tweaked my interest the most, which perhaps is damning with faint praise. But yeah, interesting, and it almost makes me think of rewatching the movie, though I get the feeling it's really bad. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but Wesley Snipes kicking ass on a aeroplane in the 90s. It sounds so bad it's good, but it's probably not. Anyway, I like the model. I think it's going to be nice, and these are better choices by Buchanan this month, I think, than some of the choices they've been making earlier. Okay, Now that's all 31 models gone through. I have seen quite a lot of criticism of this release set, and I agree with most of it, to be honest. But I don't get to decide the models that are being made, and even when there's a lot of repetition, there's still some really good stuff here. Stuff which nobody else is going to make as well as NG. So even though there's repetition, there is also some really nice schemes here that really will show off how far technology's come in the 400 scale. So that's Salmon People Alaska 77 and the Imure one Southwest. Those are both going to be gorgeous models. And the Avianca A320s, I really like those. So they're, for me, the pick of the models this month. But there are some other nice options, and there's still quite a bit of uniqueness, even though there is a lot of repetition. So keep the faith, people. I'm sure NG will be producing more unique stuff in coming months, and even if they're not, they're still producing pretty much twice as many unique models as any other brand a month. It's just a shame that they are not producing on a lot of their more interesting molds and producing a more diverse set of airlines. And I hear that criticism and I agree with it. But what can you do? I'm just here to review. I don't get to make the decisions. Okay, cool. Well, that's it for this month's look at the NG announcements. Coming up, hopefully, in the next couple of days, I'll take a look at the Gemini announcements, which I've seen people saying great things about them, but let's face it, they're very Gemini, really. And no, they're not more diverse than this set from NG. And if you think they are, you're telling porkies. But we'll look at those in the coming days. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.